All right, so we are going to take one of these buttons and we're going to turn it into an assistive switch. So this is actually, I think it's a thing where you can record one message and then you can push this and it makes a sound. But we're going to make it into a Jelly Bean switch that can be used with adapted toys. So we're going to also need a wire. So I've got my microphone jack or my audio jack here, and I like to use this one that has this other end on it because I'm just going to cut this end off and I'm going to save it, but I'll show you that. So here's my layout of the tools I will be using. And really I've got another one, actually, a better soldering iron here off camera. This one, we'll show you what we're going to use it for in just a second. Anyway, so let's get to it. Let me get my tools out of the way. So anyway, switch tester, wire cutters, wire strippers, small utility knife, small screwdriver, multimeter. I have a soldering iron that the tip has been melted off of through poor use. Oh, also a glue gun. So I'm going to get these out of the way so I can actually get to work. And first thing we're going to do is we need to get a hole into our enclosure. And really what we're going to do is we're going to put it, we can't really put it in the bottom because that would disrupt the way this sits. So we're going to put it in one of the sides. And I have found, having taken apart a number of these, that the best spot to do it, when looking at the inside, so I'm looking here at the bottom, here's the battery compartment, here's a speaker, and then there's this point right here. So I'm going to actually come in kind of between the speaker and that foot. And that will avoid all of the internal stuff that I want to avoid. So drilling into a curved surface can be problematic. So I have found an old soldering iron does quite a nice job of just melting right where I need it to be. So I'm going to just come in and just gently press, and that's all there is to it. And then I've got a nice little hole. And then I'm going to unplug this soldering iron and get it out of my way so I don't burn myself on it. Always, always, when using a soldering iron, always, always treat it as if it is smoking hot because, well, it could be. All right, now that that's done, we can flip this over again and we are going to remove these little feet. So sometimes just a little pry, and underneath these feet are screws. All right, see, there's a screw underneath each foot. Now, these feet are sticky and they're going to stick to everything. So set them off to the side, someplace where you're not going to bump into them with something else, because they will get stuck to your soldering iron cord, they will get stuck to your headphone jack, they will get stuck to your arm. They will get stuck pretty much everywhere. But we want to keep them because we're going to put them back on when we're done. Now we take off. I need a smaller screwdriver. Okay, so a couple of things to note. In this blue part of the button that comes off, you'll see there's a little notch on opposite sides, and in the housing there are notches in the opposite side, and that when we put this back together, we're going to have to make sure that those are lined up. Not so bad, right? Otherwise it won't go together right. The other thing to note is that right here is this piece of plastic that comes down, and there's a notch here in the bottom part. Those need to line up or it won't go together. All right, so we're going to set this aside for now, and we're going to look at our assemblage here. So we have these wires going to the battery compartment. Now, you don't absolutely have to do this part, but I like to. I'm just going to get these wires out of the way. We're never going to have this thing have batteries, and if somebody were to put batteries in the compartment, I don't want it to cause another problem. So I'm just going to remove the wires to the battery compartment altogether. So here's our button. We need to solder to this button. So once we get this open, we got those wires off, we're going to end up soldering to these two connectors right here. This switch is connected to the rest of this circuitry, and sometimes there's some weirdness that happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this trace right here so we know that we are not going to be connected to the rest of this circuit when we're done with this button. So this trace, we're just going to cut that nice and deep so that we know we don't have a connection through the rest of the circuit. Sometimes with some of these switches, if you don't do that, it's still kind of pressed and you're going to run the batteries down in your toy. So we're going to cut that nice and good. Now we can set our utility knife aside. We're going to need our wire next. Now we are going to need to cut part of this wire off. So I like to get the wire that has these two ends, as I mentioned, because I need this one to make a switch, and this end I can save for a future toy. So I'm going to save about, I don't know, 6 inches to a foot of wire. I'm just going to cut that off, and then I'm going to set this aside for a future toy. And then this one needs to get stripped and tinned. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our wire strippers. I don't know what size this is, so I'm going to start big and then work down. So if I start here with this one, is this doing it? Nope, it's not cutting through that insulation, so we're going to go down a step. So I'm now on the 14 stranded side. Oh, looks like 14 stranded side is the right size for this wire. And then I end up with these two very small wires. These are too small. These are smaller than 24 gauge wire. So I need to come into these holes here. So I'm going to feed them through one at a time. And I have found for this little speaker wire here that this 5/40 is the one, and I stick it so that it's just a little bit out the top of this, and then I tighten her down and I give it a yank, and it didn't go. Wait, let's try that again. Oh, that's not going to go at all. Must be that other top, the top hole there is the one I use. I'm going to go through that top hole, and there we go. Just a little bit on the end stripped off. And then we do the same thing with the red wire, again, through that smallest one. So here's the thing. If you're not sure which size to use a bigger size than you think you need. If it doesn't work, move your way down. If you use too small of a size, you're going to cut the wire off rather than strip it, which, as long as you've got extra, is not a problem. All right, so now that I've got those off, I am going to use my good soldering iron, and I'm going to tin these wires. So what does that mean? That means I'm going to put a little bit of solder on the end of the wires. That way it'll be easier to stick them together once we solder them to our switch. So, and then when soldering, you always bring the soldering iron in contact with your wire. You want to get as much surface contact as you can, and you bring the solder in from the opposite side. If the wire is hot enough, it'll melt and flow towards the soldering iron. And there we go. And then we do our other wire. And then what you can't see on my camera is I've got a little damp sponge off to the side, and I can use that to clean off any excess solder. And then also, this is a rosin core solder, and the rosin in the rosin core solder is slightly corrosive. So I always want to make sure I clean my soldering iron tip, because it'll keep it from becoming this. So we want to keep our soldering iron tip nice. We're going to clean it every time. All right, now that we've prepared the wires, we are ready for this piece again. You'll notice around that hole is kind of a melty thing. I like to clean that off a little bit. So I'm going to grab my knife again. I'm just going to clean that off just a little bit. So it's going to come off. I'd rather it come off now than in somebody's house. Okay. Here's the important thing. Before we start soldering wires to this, we need to feed the wires through this hole. So we are going to feed this through the hole. We're just going to pull it down and then set it off to the side so it's out of our way. When this is on here, this is going to be oriented like this. So we're going to run the wire from about here around to here. I like to have a little bit inside. That way it will have a little strain relief in our housing. I'm a big fan of that because if these get yanked on, I don't want these wires to get pulled off. Solder in and of itself is not very strong, and so it will not hold it in place all by itself if you give it a yank. All right, so then I'm just going to come in now. I'm going to set my tinned wire down on top of that solder pad for the switch, and I'm just going to heat it up. I'm just going to press down with the soldering iron, get everything all good and melty. I'm going to pull the soldering iron away, and I'm going to wait and not move for a few seconds, and then you see I give a little tug, it doesn't move. And now I'm going to do the other one. Same thing. I'm going to come in, I'm going to press down and heat up my tinned wire and the solder pad on that switch. Oh. Pull the soldering iron away, and I'm going to wait, and then we're good. And I'm going to clean my soldering iron tip. Now we test it. So this is what my switch tester is for. The way this works is I've got a button here that I can press on this just to confirm that it is working. And so we can see the light lights up. And then when I plug this into my switch, when I push this button, all right, so we know the soldering did its job. All right, so I'm going to turn the soldering iron off, and now I'm going to plug in the glue gun and get it heated. All right. The other thing I want to mention about the switch tester, so if this is plugged in, that LED should be not on at all unless I'm pressing the button. Occasionally I've had it where I've hooked it up and it's been on very faintly. That indicates I need to cut that trace a little deeper, but this one's good. All right, so we're going to put our switch tester out of the way, and we are now going to secure these wires down with some hot glue. So I just want to make sure that, because this is likely to be plugged into a toy by a child and is going to be pulled on, likely to be pulled on by that child. And I want to make sure, looks like I got a little glue up there on the button. I want to make sure the button doesn't get any glue on it. There we go. I want to make sure that the toy holds up, right? I want to make sure that the button holds up so that if it gets yanked on, it doesn't pull these wires free. So I'm going to put a little hot glue on right there and let it cool. And it takes a few seconds to cool. If I start moving right away, it's not actually going to adhere it in place like I want it to. So I need to let it cool a bit. And the other thing that we need to know is that the wire is going to route around the edge here, and it's going to come out right over here. That will also give it some strain relief. That's why I did it on this opposite side. I could theoretically have done it over here, but then it's much more likely to get yanked off. If I do it over here, there's a little bit of strain relief built into the whole system. All right, so it looks like that is cool enough. So I'm going to wrap the wire around here like this now, and I'm going to put a little bit more glue on there. I probably put a lot more glue on the things I modify than I really need to, but I would rather have it better chance of it lasting than risk it breaking because I didn't spend any time with some hot glue. So we're going to let that cool. Almost cool enough. This is the worst part. I hate waiting. Often I'll have 2 or 3 of these going at a time so that I can have one cooling while I'm working on another one. All right, looks like that's good enough. Now we're going to start to pull this back through, and we're going to make sure that our blue top gets put in before we try to secure it down. Again, looking for the notches. We got notches on both sides of the Those I've got to line up with those protrusions in the cap. There we go. So I shouldn't be able to twist this once it's in there. And then I'm looking again for the notch in the base and the protrusion in the cap. So I'm going to slowly pull this cord through and get it as close as I can. reline up my top. Here we go. And pull this in. All right, so now I'm going to bring this up, looking to line up that notch with the base on the cap. Come on, you can line up. Here we go. We're all lined up, and I still have a nice satisfying click. If I don't have a satisfying click, I probably don't have things lined up right inside. So now I'm going to pop in a screw in each corner here. I'm going to go opposites. I'm just going to put 2 screws in. I'm going to check my switch again. I like checking often, because nothing is worse than getting all the way done and realize you have to take it all the way back apart again because something came loose inside. All right, so now that that's secure, I'm going to go ahead and grab my switch tester again, just to double check myself. Nice satisfying click, and it lights up. All right, now I'm going to put those other 2 screws in and put the feet back on, and we are done. And then find the 4 feet. If you're missing any, you should look at your sleeves because they get stuck there very easily. You should look at any cords that may have gotten draped around, whether it's the button cord or your soldering iron cord. These are so sticky that you touch anything and they're just gonna grab right a hold. And there we go. We now have a Jelly Bean switch ready to help a child enjoy their adapted toy. Last thing, don't forget to unplug your glue gun and soldering iron.